Hi, everyone. So, this is our agenda. First, our team wants to welcome you. The Coalition for Asian American Children and Families Grants and Contracts team will be introducing ourselves. Next, we'll go into the 2025 to 2026 AAPI CDF overview. Next will be organizational eligibility, vetting, project areas, and budget. Next will be application and evaluation. Then we'll go into our contact information. And at the very end, we'll be going over questions and answers. Next slide, please. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself first. My name is Adeline DeDivas. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a Grants and Contracts Associate. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Francis.
Thank you very much, Adeline, and good afternoon, folks. My name is Francis Asperg, pronouns he, him, and I'm the grants coordinator. And I'll pass it over to my colleague, Kit.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Kit Lau, pronouns she, her, and I am the Senior Contracts Coordinator. I'll pass it to Ambrosia.
Hi, everyone. Again, welcome. My name is Ambrosia Cowie. I go by she, they pronouns, and I'm the Director of Grants and Contracts here at CACF. Before we jump into content, we wanted to acknowledge that the CACF Grants and Contracts team is composed of more than just the four of us you see here today. We also have Fiona and Simon, who are the grants coordinator and contracts coordinator for some other portfolios that CACF administers. And we also have Camilla Song and Juan Chen, who are the contracts and invoicing coordinators for our team. They offer a number of different critical infrastructure and coordinating support. So our team functions the way it does. So we just wanted to make sure that folks have a good visual of who composes the grants and contracts team here at CACF. We also wanted to acknowledge that this is a open RFA process. So I know some of you are familiar with CACF and have worked with CACF for a number of years, but some of you are not. So we did want to go over just a little bit about what the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families does, so folks can become a little bit more familiar with the way we approach our work and what we do. So CACF is the nation's only Pan-Asian children and families advocacy organization. And we bring together CBOs as well as youth and community members to fight for equity for the Asian American Pacific Islander AAPI community. The mission of CACF is to advocate for equity and opportunity for marginalized AAPI children and families. And our vision is that all children and families, including AAPIs in New York, are safe, healthy, and able to reach their full potential in life. So the way that CACF does that is through three different pillars. Our first pillar is our leadership development work. So that's the work we do with youth leaders, both within New York City and across New York State. That includes the Asian American Student Advocacy Project, ASAP, as well as the Social Justice Leadership Institute. We also do membership and coalition building through a number of different initiatives that CACF runs. We have the Asian American Crisis Relief Fund, the Access Health New York City initiative that's based in New York City, Patient Navigator Project, offering services to organizations across New York State, as well as the Communities of Color Nonprofit Stabilization Fund. I think I see some of our CCNSF awardees in this space, so welcome to you. And finally, CACF engages deeply in policy and advocacy work. So one big campaign that we run is our budget equity campaign. It's called the 18% and Growing campaign in the city. And on the state level, we do budget advocacy through the Equity Budget Coalition. I did see our Director of Policy and Government Relations in this space. So if you're interested in joining CACF's policy and advocacy work, please reach out to us and we're happy to connect you to our policy team. So in addition to budget, CACF focuses on education equity, health equity, language access, and child welfare, as well as data equity and disaggregation. So again, if any of these different buckets, initiatives, programs feel like something that you're interested in, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'll definitely connect you to folks at CACF that can give you more information. All right, and I am going to go ahead and hand it over to my colleague Francis, who will get into more details about the 2025-2026 AAPI Community Development Fund. Over to you, Francis.
Thank you very much, Ambrosia, and hello again, folks. So we're excited that this is our fourth consecutive cycle that we're launching the AAPI Community Development Fund. And as we're noticing the folks who are in attendance today, we have a good mix of folks who are either past applicants, past awardees, current applicants, current awardees, and also new ones. So just want to bring some context into light and some clarification about what to expect for the 25-26 AAPI Community Development Fund. So you may have already received the RFA from us. And just to, again, put in some reiteration and clarification about what the AAPI Community Development Fund is about, and especially for the 25-26 cycle. So this fund holistically supports projects that address hate, bias, and racism. It also holistically addresses mental health needs and increasing safety awareness and education of AAPI New Yorkers, along with holistically providing critical social and health program services that promote the safety and overall well-being of our AAPI communities. One significant difference for the 25-26 API CDF, one difference compared to our last three cycles is that for this one, the grant period will be a little bit longer, specifically 11 months. For those who have worked with us in the past, usually it's been about 6 to 7 months, but for this cycle, it'll be 11 months, which definitely gives folks even more time to work on their projects and also gives us a chance to get to know and learn more about you. So that's definitely one thing we wanted to highlight in terms of one difference you'll probably notice as you're reviewing the RFA and noticing something that I think will be very helpful for all our applicants as you're thinking about your projects. Next slide, please. So in the latest RFA that we sent out to folks, you probably have seen a section that describes more in detail about the organizational eligibility and what is required as even before you start working on your application. Just making sure you're meeting key criterias, such as making sure that you're registered, a registered 501c3, and this can also apply to fiscal sponsors as well, making sure that you're registered with the Charities Bureau of the New York State Office of the Attorney General, making sure that, again, the purpose of this grant award, this is meant to serve directly the New York State residents and not meant to be a regranting service, making sure that there is demonstrated work and outreach to the AAPI communities, demonstrating a level of linguistic and cultural competent services. Uh, the last 2 points we definitely want to stress a little bit more, and uh, something that was recently added that was not mentioned in last year's or in prior years for API CDF. So first and foremost, for the org operational budget, the cap is at 5 million. If your org cap budget is above 5 million, unfortunately, you would not be eligible to apply for this fund. And another important point that we want to stress, and we know there may be some folks on this call who might be receiving direct allocation, but if you're receiving direct allocation currently through the 2024-2025 API equity budget, unfortunately, you would be ineligible to apply. And as you're reviewing these points, again, if there's any immediate questions, concerns, please reach out to us. Again, we're happy to clarify and navigate you through these points as you're viewing. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Kit, who will explain more about the vetting process.
Thank you, Francis. There is a vetting process that applicants will go through. CACF will conduct vetting on all applicants, and you will need to have clearance before your application is considered. We will be checking the database of the IRS to make sure your organization does have tax exempt status and that you are incorporated in New York State and also currently registered with the New York State Charities Bureau. The next two agencies, the New York State Department of Labor and Workers' Compensation Board, we will be looking specifically at the department list. The department list is a list that organizations want to avoid being on. But if we do find your organization on this department list, we will reach out to you to have a further conversation about your eligibility. The project budget is also reviewed carefully by us because we want to make sure your project budget aligns well with your proposed project and that all the costs make sense in supporting the project that you wish to implement, and that it also meets compliance with the New York State Department of State. And last but not least, if you are using a fiscal sponsor, the vetting applies to your fiscal sponsor as well, and your fiscal sponsor will also need to be cleared for your application to be considered. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Kit. So also, as you're reviewing the RFA, you probably may notice a couple pages which gives even more greater detail and some potential examples of the project funding areas within AAPI CDF. So different uh, there are 8 different project areas to choose from. You are more than welcome to choose. You're more than welcome to choose more than one, just as long as it directly relates to your project proposal. Again, if you're fine with even choosing one, that's fine too. But again, what matters is as you're drafting and thinking about your project proposal and which specific project area that you intend to choose, just make sure that there is a clear, direct alignment with your project area selection and with your intended project proposal. And again, we're happy to answer questions offline as you're reviewing the project area focus. Again, happy to provide some clarifications and guidance if needed. Next slide, please.
As you're looking through the application, you will see that there is a question about your requested funding amount. So in thinking about how much you're going to request for your proposed project, you will need to look at your annual budget total because your ask cannot exceed more than 35% of your annual operating budget. But please also know that the maximum ask is 30,000. So that is the cap at 30,000 for the requested funding amount. For smaller organizations that may not have an operating budget, you may request up to $5,000 for funding request. Also, this grant is a reimbursement-based award. What this means is that all the expenses and costs for your project must be paid upfront first by your organization before you can request reimbursement from us. If you have any questions about that, please come to us. We're very happy to explain further with you and work with you on that. Next is awardees will be required to spend down your full award amount. So this is very important that you're able to spend down your full award amount. Next slide, please. The application has two parts. The first part is asking about your organizational details, background information, and the second part is a description of your proposed project and your budget costs in supporting your project. We have sent out the link for the 25-26 grant online application. If you have not received this, please reach out to us so we can send you the link. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Kit. So this is another one of the common questions we've been getting from our applicants. Folks are always wondering about how exactly the application, how it's evaluated, and what specific points are looked at. So in terms of the project evaluation criteria, of course, it's very important to make sure that your project proposal, it's focused, it's well defined, and it clearly aligns directly with one of the project areas that you're choosing. Of of course, it's important to make sure, just thinking back to the earlier slides where we were talking about what the CDF fund supports, again, making sure that it holistically addresses hate and bias and racism, making sure that you have a very clear description and understanding of the community need and the proposed project's impact to the AAPI community. Um, in thinking about your project proposal, also please make sure that in the proposal, it's demonstrating linguistic and cultural capacity as an organization, along with the understanding of the cultural and linguistic needs of the populations being served. Next slide, please. As you're thinking about your project proposal, and again, given that for this application cycle, that the fund is for 11 months, still it's important, and this is something we continue to remind folks, making sure that you have a clear and realistic, achievable timeline, along with a clear proposed impact. Uh, Even with 6 months, the project period can go fast. And even for this one with 11 months, again, just do be mindful as you're thinking about how you envision your project and making sure that it realistically fits the timeline of what your intentions, your goals, and impact are. To round out the last parts of the criteria, uh, it's important to make sure as you're thinking about your project proposal that you also have a clear project budget, making sure that there's a direct relation to it. And in thinking about the project budget, making sure that the project costs that you're putting on the budget, making sure that it is reasonable and sufficient to the project intentions and goals that you want to accomplish from this project. And again, we're happy to answer any questions you have as you're drafting and thinking about what you're um, what you're planning to propose. I'm happy to, again, troubleshoot and clarify parts of the application that, again, is important as you're thinking about uh, how you want your proposal to be evaluated. Next slide, please.
Here's the timeline for the New York State AAPI Community Development Fund. We released RFA in January 21st, and we are wrapping up our virtual community briefing with today's second briefing. And Francis and I will be offering virtual office hours March 3rd to the 7th. If you have any questions about the application or need guidance regarding the application, you can meet with us, reach out to us to make an appointment. The application deadline is March 10th. So please keep that in mind. March 10th is the application deadline. And we'll send out decisions to applicants by April 25th. And the project start date and end date is May 1st to March 31st. So you will have 11 months to implement your project. Next slide, please. Here is the contact information for our team for AAPI Community Development Fund. Next slide, please. And I will turn it to Ambrosia.
Thanks, Kit. So we wanted to include an extra slide based on some of the questions that came up in our last briefing, just to be a little bit proactive about some of the information that might not have been clear during the actual presentation. So one common question was, if your organization receives funding from the 2024-2025 New York State DOS equity allocation through CACF, is your organization eligible to apply? So this is something we really want to highlight. If you receive a direct allocation through the New York State AAPI equity budget, you are not eligible to apply for this, whether you receive it through AAF or CACF. Another question we got was, has the application changed from last year? So the application questions have slightly changed. We added some information around the questions, and we added a couple more questions. So it has changed a little bit from last year, in case you applied last year and are familiar with that application process. Another common question we got was, is any of this funding from the federal government? And the answer to that is no. Historically, this has been 100% state funded. So is not at this time impacted by anything that's happening on the federal government level. Oh, sorry. Another question is, do we receive funds at the midpoint of the project timeline? The answer to that is that you'll receive a 25%, if you're awarded this funding, you'll receive a 25% advance at subcontract execution. So you get 25% of your award upfront. And then additional funding will be provided via reimbursement requests at different due dates within the contract period. There will be at least one midpoint due date and one final due date at the end of the contract term. And then another question that was pretty common was, is there an opportunity to get some feedback if you submit your application early? And the answer to that is unfortunately not. We don't offer feedback on applications, just typically because of the way that the applications are reviewed. They go to an allocation panel. So once your application is submitted, that's your application. So we wanted to pause here. We're done with the formal presentation. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to take them. I see in the chat, one just came through. So the question is, can we apply as an individual artist with LLC without fiscal 501c3 sponsor? You mentioned this is a reimbursement grant, so we have to fund all project expenses on our own. How often are we reimbursed after we submit receipt? So a couple of questions in this one. The first question is, can we apply as an individual artist with an LLC without a 501c3 sponsor? So the answer to that is no. You must be a 501c3 organization to be eligible to apply for this fund. And the second question, question/statement, you mentioned this is a reimbursement grant, so we have to fund all of our project expenses on our own. That is correct, aside from the 25% advance. So when you execute your subcontract, you will get a little bit of payment upfront, but it is a reimbursable grant. So the expectation is to have to pay for some of your project expenses, and those will be reimbursed. How often are we reimbursed after we submit receipts? So again, there will be at least 2 opportunities to submit a reimbursement request due date. Those will be, the specific due dates will be shared with you if you are awarded this contract. So there will be at least 2. Sid asked, will you share the deck with us? Yes, we will. Another question, is performance art-based social community art projects eligible? Without knowing any more of the project itself, on a high level, yes, that sounds eligible, but please make sure you're reviewing the RFA. and reading those specific project areas, they have to fall within those project areas. But just based on the high level description, it does sound like it's an eligible project as long as you tie it into the purpose of the funding. Again, if you have additional questions, just keep putting them in the chat. I will just continue reading them down. Jay asks, can organizations submit a collaborative approach or an application that includes partnerships? Yes, you are more than welcome to submit a collaborative application. Please note, though, that we'll be subcontracting with one organization. So one organization has to take the lead. If you want to propose a lead organization that's partnering with other folks, you can, but we will be subcontracting with one organization, and the cap still remains the same at 30,000. Alex asks, how do you determine what gets reimbursed and what doesn't? So this is a government contract, so there's really specific allowable and unallowable expenses, which if you are awarded this contract, we will go over with you in very, very specific detail. Some of the costs that are not allowed for reimbursement, and again, this is government funding, so it's based on the Department of State, the New York State Department of State reimbursement rules. So some things that are not reimbursed are taxes are not reimbursed, lobbying expenses are not reimbursed, fundraising expenses are not reimbursed, alcohol is not reimbursed. So there's a specific list that we share with folks who are awarded for these fundings about different costs that are not reimbursed based on the nature of the funding. And if there's any additional questions on that, just put them in the chat and we'll address them. Carmen asks, are you able to share, based on history, what the acceptance rate for successful applications on average or guesstimate are? We can share that. Off the top of my head, very unofficially, in our last cohort, we got 99 applications submitted, and I think our cohort is around 20. But we can share in a follow-up email the acceptance rate based on previous application cycles. Again, there's a specific pot of money, and that rate will really fluctuate based on the applications that we receive. Our last cycle, we did get a lot more than we had in previous cycles. Xiao asks, I have two questions. One, how many programs can each organization submit? And two, can the program cover more than one focus area, such as mental health and culture and arts? Thank you. So the first question is, I'm going to interpret as how many applications can an organization submit? We request that you submit one application. And the second question is how many programs, or can the program cover more than one focus area, such as mental health and culture and arts? Yes. When you submit your application, you can choose as many project areas as you want. So if you want to choose all 8, you can choose all 8. The thing that we want to really emphasize is that part of the evaluation process is determining how well the project areas you chose fits to the project you're proposing. So you won't get extra points if you select more than one. It's really based on how closely does the project you propose match the project areas, and really understanding the need in your community, how the project you propose addresses that need, and your understanding of the community you're working with. Next question is, will you have the same open call again for next year? That's a really tough question for us to ask, just because I'm going to go into the nature of this funding. So this funding isn't a guaranteed source for us because it's coming from the government and coming from the state government. CACF and our co-lead Asian American Federation, every single year we have to advocate for these funds. So they are not a guaranteed source of funding for us. We talked a little bit about the work of CACF in the advocacy space. And this is the direct result of that work. So if we do get a policy win, if we do get this budget allocated again, then yes, we really hope to have the same open call again for next year. But funding isn't guaranteed. Big plug, if you want to get involved with our advocacy, it's happening right now. It's budget season, it's budget advocacy season. So if you're interested in that at all, please let us know and we'll connect you to our policy team who is often in Albany at this time of year. The next question is, are pilot programs encouraged or should we focus on continuing expanding current programming? It's a really great question, and this is something that we often leave to the organization. So we're not judging on whether it's a new program, we're not judging on whether it's something you want to continue or expand. All projects are welcome. It's really based on the needs of your organization. But again, the evaluation process is really looking at what you're proposing, how you're able to communicate the need, how you're able to communicate how your project meets that need, and your connections within the community. So all programs welcome. It's just based on what you are wanting to do as an organization. It's not terribly prescriptive in that way. Clarifying question about eligibility. I see there's a requirement to be a 501c3 with a history of at least 2 years as a nonprofit as well. If we had been functioning as a nonprofit with a fiscal sponsor for over 2 years, but only earned our own 501c3 status this year, are we ineligible? It's a great question. Technically, yes, but let's talk offline. If you could shoot us an email, we're really interested in hearing additional nuance around your situation. And we can talk a little bit more about that, about this requirement. But yes, I do want to also flag that we do allow fiscal sponsorship for this, which might be an option for your organization as well. But shoot us an email and we can talk through a little bit more about your specific situation. Mustafa asks, in our proposal, do we need to specify all the itemized budget items, including overhead costs? High level, yes. When you do submit your application, you do need to submit a completed budget. But the thing I want to flag is that if you are awarded an award, there is opportunities within the contract period, specifically at the beginning and also during the entire contract term, to submit a budget modification. We do know that projects change, realities change, needs change pretty often. So if you're seeing that what you had initially proposed isn't necessarily matching that same need you're seeing in your community at the time of award, we can work with you to change and modify anything in terms of budget. Another question, is food and or refreshment allowable expense for events and trainings for attendees? Yes, food and refreshment is an allowable expense as long as you can relate it to your project. Thank you all for attending. Super gracious for all of these questions. They're amazing questions, keep them coming. So Carmen asks, I'm new to this process, so I apologize if this question is too basic. No question is too basic. Can you elaborate on the role of the fiscal sponsor in this application process? Thank you. So the role of the fiscal sponsor in this app, I'm going to take your question very, very, very literally. So when you're applying for this application, if you're a project without 501c3, or if you're a project without that works with a fiscal sponsor in any capacity and you're wanting to engage a fiscal sponsor, they don't necessarily need to be involved at this application stage. Where your fiscal sponsor will be involved is in the contracting process. We have to contract with your fiscal sponsor if you as a group are ineligible for the specific funding. The way that we engage with your fiscal sponsor is really up to you. We understand that fiscal sponsorship is a relationship that is based on you and the other organization. So we're not terribly prescriptive on overseeing that relationship. We will require to see the contract between you and your fiscal sponsor. But I think in terms of how you want them to be involved in this application process is up to you. We don't specifically require anything at this point. If you need additional clarification, please let me know, and I'm happy to talk through more if I misinterpreted your question. Pauline asks, can you share a list of the specific application questions in the budget template? Yep, we sure can. We'll be sending out a follow-up email. We can include both the specific application questions as well as the budget template in that. Jeremy asked, what is the deadline to be registered with the Charity Bureau of the New York State Office of the Attorney General? That's a great question. Email us on the side, but by one of the team members, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what we discussed was you should be at least have a registration in with the Charities Bureau by the deadline. But if I'm wrong about that, one of my team members can come off mute and correct me. But again, we're really interested in supporting your organizations, both through our process, but also through the processes that are required by this contract. So Jeremy, if you want, please email us separately, and we'd like to learn a little bit more about your specific situation, and see if there's any way we can be supportive of your organization getting through Charity Bureau registration. Next question, if an organization is applying for funding already, can they be a fiscal sponsor for someone else? That's a great question and not a situation we've seen before. Let's me get back to you on that. And we're at the end of our questions. Is there any additional questions that folks have? I'm actually going to stop sharing screen at this point. But aside from the last one that was asked, which we will circle back on, are there any additional questions that folks have for around this funding? Earlier, someone asked, will you email us a recorded version of today's presentation after? Yes. So in our follow-up email, in addition to the things that we said we would email out, which is a copy of the application questions, the budget template, we will be sharing the slide deck and a recorded version of today's presentation.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here, just a correction on the New York State Charities Bureau. When our team last discussed, your organization, when our team last discussed about the required registration for the New York State Charities Bureau, we had agreed that the applicant must be registered with the New York State Charities Bureau by the budget start period, which is May 1st. So I hope that clears things up.
Thanks, Kit. So you have a little bit more time. So May 1st, the start of the contract period. Any other questions?
Hey, Ambrosia, sorry to jump in. There was a question that came actually in one of our registrations. I'm just going to drop it in the chat. I think this is definitely an important question.
So I'm going to read it out. Any suggestions for organizations with smaller operating budgets of around 60K? This would mean 30%, 35% of 60K, so requesting a 20K grant, correct. So we do have two requirements around your project budget. One is that it's a max of 30K, and the other is that it cannot exceed 35% of your budget. So this is correct if the math is correct. So yes, this would mean a max grant of 20K if the math is correct. Let me double check really quickly. If your operating budget is 60K. 21K would be your cap in this instance. Any other questions that folks have for us? Okay, I'm hearing not so many questions, and I'm not seeing any more in the chat. We as a team will stay on for a little bit longer, just in case anybody has more specific questions they want to ask of us. But I think as of right now, we can go ahead and end our presentation. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. We really look forward to seeing your applications. Some helpful reminders: we have office hours with the team. Kit and Francis are offering from March 3rd to the 7th, I believe, and flagging that deadline of March 10th, 11:59 p.m. Again, we're going to stay on for a little bit in case you have any additional questions, but thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful day, y'all.